Hello fellow developers, welcome to another J for JavaScript tutorial. In this tutorial, we'll be building this beautiful live word and character counter. Let's see what it does. So our live word counter can tell us how many words are in our particular text and the characters contained in the text. Not only that, but it can also do that when we paste. As we can copy this, come here. As you can see, we get the characters and words in our text, whether we have typed it or pasted it. So this is what we'll be building today. I hope you enjoy and have fun. In this short tutorial, we'll learn a lot, including the DOM object properties and methods, like the addEventListeners that will listen to clicks or any event we add to our HTML document, and look at another document method like getElementById that will be assigning to our special elements in our HTML, and so on and so forth. And then we'll also look at some JavaScript methods, string methods we looked at earlier with our JavaScript for beginner tutorials to strengthen your JavaScript and generally your HTML and CSS. As always, I'm going to leave the link to my CodePen in the description below for you to play around with this, and the GitHub repo as well. Our server is already running. As you can see, if we check our HTML, you can see it's already here, loaded up and running in the live browser. I'm using VS Code as I mentioned earlier before, and you can use any text editor of your choice, but I prefer this because it has wide range of extensions and just simpler to type in. Okay, if you enjoy such content and enjoy my videos, please don't forget to like and subscribe and share. Without further ado, let's get started. As always, I'll leave timestamps in the description below for you to jump around to the section that interests you the most, and yeah, enjoy. All right, now let's start with the HTML of our project. Okay, as I did in the previous video, we're not going to spend much time on the HTML. Our code, you can find the code in my CodePen. I'll leave the link in the description below. Let me organize this and get our HTML right here. I'll copy what we need. And paste it within our body. Our live server should be reflecting the changes. Let's close this. If we refresh, and great. So let's see what we have done here. Inside our body, we have our h1. We have our header, which says my live word and counter, which you can see here. You can change it to anything you want. And inside, we have our text area with a placeholder of please type anything you have here. Another property of name, ID, rows, columns. This you can change to any width you want, how many columns you want in your text area, and it would expand to that specific number. If you say 50, it will expand by 50 columns, as you can see here. So those are numbers you can play around with. Name, this is not necessary, you can remove it. And then we have our h2, which says your text has, which is here. And then after our h2, we have a div that has a class of flex count, which we'll look at later in our CSS styling. And then in our div, we have another div that holds our words and number, which is the 0 here, and the words paragraph of words. Our h5 has an ID of word count and our paragraph. Take note of these IDs, which we'll use in our JavaScript later, or using our DOM methods to get the IDs. Then in another div, we have another one for the characters, and its number, which is 0. And that's pretty much it with the HTML. Nothing complicated here, really. Simple, just simple headers and divs, and there we have our simple HTML. Next, let's look at some styling. But before I continue to styling, let us commit these local changes to our remote repository here so that it can get the changes we have on our local machine to our remote repository for you guys to access the same source code I have. And if you're still confused about Git, it's really simple to get started. All you have to do is to go to Git download, click on the first website or the site. If you're Windows or Mac OS, click Windows and download the setup and run it. Simple as that. Really simple. And the commands, it's simple as going to and getting a list of the Git common commands we use. So it's really simple. I'll share this link in the descriptions below and in our Slack community for you to get started quickly. All right, so let's do just that. Let's open our terminal here. Let's create a branch first. Then add our changes, which you can also track on the side panel here. As you can see, this shows you the active branches you have staged, and you need to simply commit them with this command. And ready to push. And press enter. Now our changes should be reflected on GitHub, as you can see. Compare and pull request. Create a pull request. A pull request is simply a request for your changes to be merged with the master. So let's merge our changes. Confirm merge. And should be getting the same changes on our master. If we check back, we should be getting those changes when we pull from our remote repository. And our project should be working as expected. If we just refresh here, there you go. All right, so next let's look at our styling. So let's close this and head to our styles. Okay, back to our CodePen project. Close the HTML panel and let's get our styles. Press them in and the changes should be reflected in our live server project. But wait, we forgot one thing. We should connect our styles in the HTML document. So let's use the link tag and it should be working now. Great. So let's briefly explain what's happening in our styles. So this is a universal selector. It selects everything in our document and it says set everything to margin 0, padding 0, box sizing, border box, font family, sans serif. In the previous video, we were using Roboto, which we imported from Google Fonts. You can check it out if you want to add a custom font that's not available by default. So on the body, we have a display flex, align item center, justify content center, flex direction column, flex direction. By default, flex items are in a row. So we need to change the direction to columns. If we comment this out, you see that our items will shift to a row direction. So putting flex directions, a flex direction of column puts them in a column, as you can see right here. And then we have our min height to 100 viewport height, which always gives us a full screen. And the background color, we have yellow. Again, you can choose any color you want and give it a black background color, a grayish background color, really anything you can think of. So let's put that back. Then we target our text area. And notice these are elements. They don't need, there's a period selector or a dot selector, which we'll look at later when we are designing or styling classes. These are elements, HTML elements, and we don't need to use periods or full stops to target them. So our text area, as you can see, we gave it a margin of 10 pixels, a border of none. If we remove the border, we'll have that ugly outline around our text area, as you can see. And the outline, if we remove the outline, if you click inside the text area, you get that ugly outline as well. So if you want to remove all that, simple way is using the outline none and then the border none. Then we have our width 50%. Then we have our border radius 5 pixels, which explains the curvy corners around our text area. Then we have the text align left. Again, you can change the direction of where you want your text to be aligned. You can say center, and our placeholder will be in the center. You can say left, and it will go to the left. Sorry, so right. As you can see, padding 20 pixels inside the text area. If we remove the padding, you see that our text is close to the text area. So the padding increases space within the element, within the container or the content of the element we are giving a padding to. Now we'll go to our full stop selector. As you can see, flex count is the class we have given. Sorry, let's close this too. Is a special class we had given our div here. As you can see, we have selected it and given it some special styles, background color, width of 50% as well, a margin of 10 pixels. Margin is simply the space top, bottom, left, and right. If we remove the margin, you see that everything will be close to each other. And then we give it display flex, which we said by default puts all its content in a row. As you can see, our words and characters are in a row. If we remove our display flex, you will find them in their default column alignment that the divs always be in. Let's give them back our flex. Then we have our padding. I'll justify content space around to give them space between. If we comment that out, you find that our numbers start from the beginning of our words and not in the center. So putting text align center centers the numbers in the center of our element. Then we have border radius of 5 pixels. Then we also have in the flex count, we have paragraphs, which we give this gray like color. And in our H5, we give it this white color. Nothing complicated here really. Simple styling, flex at work. And that's it. Now, as we learned before, let us commit these changes to our remote repository. Now, there's a simpler way to commit our changes to our remote repository without even using the command line. But I highly recommend you get used to the commands before you even start using this method. So this, you simply go to the branch icon, click on the plus icon, stage all the changes. As I said, it's not good for us to push any changes directly to our master because that might cause conflict when other developers send in other requests different from what changes are on the master. So always first create a different branch. Again, you can do this, name the name of your branch, press enter, and then you can write here. Now stage your changes, which we have already done. And this is what we call commit messages. Of course, it's always important you describe your messages in a clear and descriptive way for your fellow developers to understand. Click on the tick to commit and then simply press the publish changes. Now, if we check our remote repository, those changes should be reflecting. As you can see, they are right here. As always, if you have conflicts, this would normally bring an X and would recommend you to fix those commits. Fortunately for us, we have no conflict. Let's merge the changes. Now let's check back to our master. And pull the changes. And those changes should be reflected in our project right now, as you can see. So you have seen the fancier way of committing changes, pulling in changes, and also the geeky way, but I highly recommend you get familiar with the commands first before you get familiar with the clicking. Okay, that's about it. And now next we're going to take a look at our JavaScript, how we're going to use DOM methods to manipulate this project right here for it to know the number of words and characters in the text area. Okay, let's close this. And just before we dive into our JavaScript, let's have a quick look at what the HTML DOM is. So as you can see here in this article, when our HTML document is loaded in the web browser, it becomes a document object. And as you can see, these are the following properties or methods available to this document we can use to access the document. So the document is simply a tree or a list of our elements in our HTML file. Each element is known as a node, and there's a helpful extension called HTML2 generator, which helps analyze the DOM element of any website. So I recommend you install that extension in your browser and we'll be good to go. I've already done that, so I highly recommend you do that. All right, now let's use extension and examine our website. As you can see, it's among my extensions. Let's click there, and as we see here in this diagram below, it has generated a tree of our HTML elements. The top root of our HTML document is the HTML root, as you can see, and it shows us the relationships between the root and the children and parents. So each element is known as a node. So as you can see, this is simply our whole document in a tree-like structure from the HTML to the script tag. As we hover over our elements, the head, it shows the relationships in the head, in the body, and the HTML. Now there's an interesting dialog box on the top right. As you can see, it shows us the node details, the tag name, the node ID, and the number of children. So if we hover over h1, we know that our tag name is h1 and there's no ID attached to our h1. Now if we hover over the text area, you notice there's an ID of input text. Now if you recall our HTML file, we passed an ID of input text to our text area. If I added any ID, let's close that for now, any ID in our HTML, let us, for example, add an ID on this div, and reload our tree generator. You'll see that the ID has been passed to that div. As you can see, if we go to the div, you can see the div sample ID from our HTML file. So this is the really helpful extension that helps you visualize your DOM element and help you see everything visually. Another way you can do that is using a console F12 and simply console directory and then call your document. Now this will return the whole document of your specific website, and inside this document, let's make this big, we get to see every method and property connected to the document, our URL, links, and most importantly our body. So inside our body, child nodes, as I said. And interestingly, in the child nodes, you can see when you hover over these child nodes, your specific element in the web browser is highlighted, just like you would be inspecting an element in the element section. So if you click on that specific node child, you will be taken to a styles element, to that element. As you can see, we have clicked on the text area and we have been directed to the styles section in the console. So this is pretty helpful, and it helps you navigate through your website using just the DOM elements. So I hope you got a basic understanding of the HTML DOM. It's simply a tree-like structure with nodes. Enough about the DOM element introduction. Now let's connect our HTML to our script file. Okay, we start that with the script tag. Connect our index.js file. Now let's go to the index.js file. So let us think about what we want to do. First, we want to get, if we open our extension here, we want to get elements by their IDs. And our first element with our ID is the text area, the input text, and then these two h5 tags with the word count and word character. So we want to get elements by their ID. Then use those elements to count characters in our text input and count words. So those are three things we want to do. First, let us start with getting the elements by their IDs. If you look through this list, there's a simpler way of doing that, and that is here, right here. Getting element by ID returns the element that has the ID attribute which with the specified value. So that's exactly what we are going to do. Okay, but before that, we have to declare variables to assign those IDs to. So let us declare 3 variables with 3 IDs in our HTML document. Make sure it's the same spelling as your ID in your HTML. Do the same thing for Word. And we have finished defining our IDs and the IDs we need to make the 2 steps possible. But just to be sure, let's console log our IDs. And if you have noticed, there's an extension I use to help me autocomplete, and that's the tab 9. I highly recommend you install that in your VS Code. To install extensions, you simply come on this icon and simply tap there, and then type in the specific extension you are looking for. In this case, you're looking for tab 9, which is very popular and very powerful. As you can see, I already have it installed. So if you want auto completion of your code snippets, you can simply use tab 9. Okay, let's see what we get in the console. As you can see, we get our elements associated with that ID: text input, character count, and word count. Great. Now we don't need that anymore. Now that we know we have our IDs, now let's move on to the next thing. We want to be able to count the characters in our text area. Right now it doesn't do anything, as you can see, but we want to be able to know the number of characters in our text input text area. So how are we going to do that? Fortunate for us, the HTML DOM has what we know as event listeners. If you look through the list again, there's what we call the add event listeners. So these event listeners help us fire desired events we want to capture depending on the action of the user. So as you can see here, attaches an event handler to the document. So we are going to add an event listener to inside our input text ID and return a function that simply say count the characters returned within the text. So let's do that right now. Add and within the parentheses, that's why we pass the event, a specific event. There are very many events, and right now the event we're looking for is the input event that listens for any change in the text area. Then a callback function that returns a result. So we want to simply return the character count, right? So we simply do this. Then text content. The text content is a DOM property that prints out the value in our HTML document. value.length. So we want to count the length of the characters in our input or in our text area. So let's see what we get in our document. Let's close the console. And as you can see, we are getting back this result in our character element. So text content returns that value and then assigns it to the input text which we are getting from here and shows us the length of the characters we are typing in the text area. Great. Now let us use the trim method to remove any white spaces within our text. Console log now. As you can see, it does what we exactly wanted. Great. Let's close that. So now we are done with our character count. As simple as that. Okay, now let us count the words in the text input. Okay, so how are we going to do that? Now that we already have our trimmed text input, we're simply going to split that to an array and then filter out any empty strings. Okay. If all this is unfamiliar to you, I recommend you check out my beginner tutorial, my beginners playlist. And just before I forget, we will have to count the length of the array too. Okay. So we will also perform a little bit of some regular expression to help us achieve a particular need. Let's call our variable text context, which again returns the value content of a specified element. Text input, our trimmed text, then split it. Then now let us use some regular expressions. These are known as separators, and inside our separators we pass a condition or simply a flag we want for it to do or perform in a specific string. The regular expressions just help us are great for strings to filter out any unnecessary or elements you do not need in a specific string. So the \s is simply a type that matches any single spaced character within the string, and then the plus is simply a quantifier, meaning that do the same as much as possible continuously until the end of the specific string. Then let's filter. I highly recommend you to watch my array tutorial if you haven't seen that. It explains various array methods like the filter, map, and so on and so forth. Now let's see what happens in our text input. Now, as you can see, our words are being counted as well as our characters. Now, where the regular expression special type of \s comes in is when now you hit a space and type another text, it will account for that. Great. And there we go. Our simple text input works. We can as well paste if we remove this and paste to still do the same thing. And that's how our live word and character counter works. Great. And there we have it. We have come to an end of our tutorial. I hope you have learned as much as you can and hope to see you in the next one. So let's recap what we have looked at. We have seen how we can use the DOM, HTML DOM, and its special methods to add elements to our HTML. We have also looked at some JavaScript and how we trim our text and then split our text into substrings of array using the split method and then filter through that array and return the length of that specific array. So I hope you had fun. I hope you learned something. I'm going to leave the links to my code pen in the link in the description below and the GitHub repo. And as always, we are always live, always connected on our Slack community. If you do not understand anything here, feel free to hit us up there. We'll be ready to answer any of your questions. Okay? Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and keep learning. See you in the next one, and bye bye.